This tutorial is going to cover how to develop effective keywords. And this is something that I find to be really important when it comes to effective searching. So I'm just going to give you a couple tips that I have learned in my many, many years as a research librarian. And the good thing about these strategies is that they'll apply to any database. So for our examples, I'll be looking at Primo, but you can use the same sort of rules of thumb when you're looking at any database. So one thing that I recommend before you even get started with a search is to brainstorm your topic. So think about the key concepts that you're trying to look for and maybe like write them down. And then you can think about related terms or synonyms, just so you have a list of things that you can try to search once you actually get into the database. And then that list will grow as you start to see how scholars are describing the problem. And in this tutorial, I'm going to go through sort of three common problems that happen with students when it comes to keywords. So the first one is using too many keywords. So the thing to keep in mind is that the more keywords you use, the more you are narrowing your search results. So that's just something to keep in mind. Another problem I see students having is that they use acronyms. So for example, using LGBT when you might actually get better results if you spell out lesbian, gay, and then had your other keywords, and I'll show you that. And then the third problem is learning the scholarly language, and that's something that will happen as you begin to get into the databases, as you try a couple searches and find some things that are helpful. You really want to start to absorb how are scholars describing this issue. So to illustrate these issues, I'm going to show you a couple examples. So let's start with the issue of using too many keywords. So let's imagine that you are interested in childhood sexual abuse and you want to see how that affects poverty, education, homelessness, and income. Now, what I would see here, we're only seeing about 1,600 results in Primo, and I can tell you right away that that's not a lot when it comes to Primo because Primo searches everything that we have. So what's happening is that we have used too many keywords in this search, and so there are just too few journal articles and books that are mentioning all of these things. So what I recommend to students is that yes, you might be interested in all of these factors that are affected by childhood sexual abuse, but you want to search for them individually. So instead of just having one search that covers everything, you're going to split this up into several different searches. So for example, and actually I'm going to use advanced search, and this is something that's in every database. It essentially gives you a little bit more control over how you put your keywords together. I'm going to say I'm going to keep my childhood sexual abuse as a keyword, and then I'm going to put in homelessness. And then you can see right off the bat, we're getting way more results. They look really good, they look relevant. And then I would repeat this for the other factors that I was interested in, for example, education. Okay, so that's how to deal with that first problem, taking all those keywords, which may indeed be key concepts in your research, but splitting them up into several different searches. The next common problem that I see is when people search for acronyms instead of spelling out the entire word. And that's something that we're probably used to doing in Google, but it doesn't work quite as well when we're looking at a database. So I am going to search for LGBT homeless. So we're imagining that I'm interested in looking at LGBT youth and homelessness. And looking at these results, I have about 4,000 or so. And some of them do, in fact, look relevant to my search. But as I go down, I feel as though there's probably more out there. So I'm going to change this up a little bit, and I'm going to search for lesbian, gay, and homeless. And that has essentially doubled my search results, which is almost counterintuitive because I'm using more keywords. But what I've done is I've expanded my search by spelling out this acronym, and more scholars are going to be using these terms than are going to be using LGBT. And this looks like a great article. Out on the street, a public health and policy agenda for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth who are homeless. If I click on that title, I can see all the places where my keywords came up, and it looks just a little bit more relevant. Okay, so you can certainly try using those acronyms. but I think that you'll get better results if you spell them all the way out. My last example is about learning the scholarly language, and this is something that really doesn't happen until you've found some journal articles and you've read them and you really sort of dug deep into the literature, and then you'll start to get a feeling for how are scholars describing this issue. One example that came up the other day was the opioid epidemic, because that is often how we hear it referred to in the news. So I'm going to search for opioid epidemic. I have about 41,000 results, which is a lot. There's a print book on prescription drug abuse, a couple videos, a couple articles here. But in general, these don't look like scholarly journal articles to me. And of course, I can limit to peer-reviewed journals, but I also may want to rethink how I am phrasing my search. By using the term epidemic, I might be skewing my search a little bit too much towards popular sources, because remember, Primo does include newspapers, magazines, videos, etc. It's not just scholarly journal articles. My first strategy here then would first be to limit to peer-reviewed journals, and then I would start looking at these journals, seeing if they're relevant to me, maybe printing a few out, read them, but I would also want to look at the subject headings. Right now, I'm looking at an article called A Comprehensive Approach to Address the Prescription Opioid Epidemic in Washington State. It's from the American Journal of Public Health. And looking at these subject headings, I can see that they're using the term prescription drug misuse instead of opioid epidemic as a subject heading. So that gives me a clue that maybe to find some more articles, I might want to reframe my search a bit. So again, I'm going to go to advanced search. And I am going to search for prescription drug, and I'm going to say and abuse or misuse. When I use or, I'm telling the database I will take either of these terms. And I'm going to add one more line and put in, opioids. And by doing that, I have expanded my search results by quite a bit. I now have about 24,000 results. And if I limit again to peer-reviewed journals, I'm seeing some more great articles that I didn't see with my first search for just opioid epidemic. And so it's just given me a lot of more literature to look at. And that's essentially what developing effective keywords is about. It's about making sure that you're seeing everything that's out there in terms of what scholars have written. And one piece of advice I give to every student is I've been doing this for almost a decade, and my first search is never my best search. I always adapt my keywords once I start to see what's out there. So don't get discouraged if you've been searching and you're not finding a lot. Just take a little bit of time to think about your keywords, think if you can expand that search a bit. And of course, you can always contact the librarians, and we're happy to help you with this. So to wrap up this piece on developing effective keywords, we went through a bunch of examples that I hope illustrated how you can adapt your keywords to be more effective within the databases. But again, one of your major takeaways here should be that this takes practice and it takes time, and you have to read some articles before you can really get the best possible keyword search out there. So please remember that you can always contact us at the library, and we're happy to walk you through this process.